In today's complex business environment, leaders need not only to be prepared for the worst, but also to build their resilience. At The Human Factor, Corporate Integrity Matters' Sonja Stirnimann invites top executives, board members, and industry experts to reflect and talk about the realities of corporate integrity, risk, and ethical leadership. As an international governance authority, independent director, and entrepreneur, she understands the challenges leaders face. Integrity and ethical leadership are not just principles. They build resilience, enhance reputation, and create strategic competitive advantage for organizations and for individuals.
Today, I'm honored to welcome Nick Gallo, Chief Servant and Co-CEO of Ethico and host of both the Ethicverse weekly webinar series and the Ethics Expert podcast. Nick Gallo has seen firsthand the transformative impact compliance and culture can have on generating sustainably superior results. Nick is a student of behavioral economics and organizational psychology and has worked with and analyzed hundreds of organizations over his career in advisory services, private equity, and compliance. He also has a Bachelor in Finance, Accounting and Economics from India University, is a member of Mensa International, Certified Public Accountant and Chartered Financial Analyst L3 candidate, and has dedicated his life to serving his community, clients, team in order to make the world a better workplace. So, Nick, we both know that integrity isn't something you find on a strategy map. It's often forged in quiet and high-stakes moments. So let's explore where it has shown up also in your daily work with leaders, but also in your current role as a co-CEO at Ethico. Where does corporate integrity actually show up beyond compliance when you look at it as an entrepreneur and you own your business?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. Thanks for having me. I think integrity kind of shows up as sort of the mortar in the wall. You know, compliance is maybe the bricks in the wall, and integrity is what kind of holds it together, because compliance can't sort of articulate every single scenario that somebody might come in contact with. I think integrity is kind of a way of being, and it's, you know, the typical definition is doing the right thing when no one's watching, you know? And so I think that ends up kind of tracing itself down or being rooted down in the culture that maybe, you know, the way that an individual kind of goes through life and the way that a company, you know, the way the company's sort of culture comes together to kind of, you know, fill in those cracks in situations that are not articulated by a code of conduct or by some kind of a policy.
Absolutely. And I had a discussion, you know, over lunch today, and I said the individual integrities, for example, your integrity together with my integrity. So it's not that at the end we have the sum of integrities at the table, because it always shifts again. What do you think about that? Because people talk about corporate integrity, but we also have our individual integrities. And I think we cannot just add it up, not at all, because it changes whenever you have a new individual coming in.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think you know, to the extent that the integrity of an organization is just the sum total of all the individual integrity quotients of the people, the stakeholders, well then, as you add a new ingredient to the soup, well, the taste of that soup changes.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's important, I think, not just, you know, I think we all have it in us to some degree. And I think that's why it's really important for an organization to be able to articulate, you know, how they want to do business and what's in bounds and what's out of bounds, and what that algorithm at the end of the day, that sort of prioritization of priorities are for the business, so that people know how they can act. You know, we might, you know, and for some reason people seem to sort of separate their sort of work selves from their personal selves, and they feel like they have to put on this different mask or whatever. And I think that's natural, right? Like you act, you know, everybody acts maybe a little bit different depending on the group that they're in or the setting that they're in or the circumstances that they find themselves. So I just think it's really important to continually reinforce what's, you know, what's most important for the organization. But to your point, an organization is changing all the time. Like the human body, they say like all the cells die and regenerate over a 7-year period. So like even the composition, the atoms in your entire body are changing constantly. So how do you maintain who you are in the face of that like constant evolution and that constant change? It's kind of continual like renewing of what's important and so forth. So I think that also translates inside of an organization because, to your point, people are changing, new circumstances happen, the market changes, new challenges, new technologies, all these things are kind of competing forces for the bonfire that is the culture of integrity to like perhaps die down. You have to keep that reaction going. You know what I'm saying? That takes a lot of focus. It takes a lot of effort.
Exactly. And we have to be conscious about it because I think often it just gets forgotten. And that's also my next question. So what do you think, which decisions in your boardroom, but maybe also in the boardroom of your clients, are most at risk of misalignment when it comes to integrity or values or long-term trust?
I think the ones that are at most at risk are kind of like, how do I say this? It's like, if you're not focused on it, like there's this certain level of like ethical overconfidence that I think can happen in a boardroom. You know what I'm saying? And it's easy to say, well, I have high integrity. Of course, everybody else does. And not that they don't, but I think it's really important that we're constantly talking about what matters most. And, again, I just think culture is the only sustainable competitive advantage in business. And culture is like a bonfire. It's not like a light switch that you just flip on. It's like, okay, great. The lights are on
and it's okay. Yeah.
The project is done. No, it's like, it's a bonfire that you have to continually feed. And just like, I have 3 kids, and it's not like I just say one time, don't talk back to your mom. One time, say please and thank you to a server. Like I have to say that 100 times, and I have to keep saying it to really make that sort of soak in and remind them that it's not just lip service. Because listen, like there's all kinds of words that are thrown around in our business and marketing and parenting, whatever. And those words are not, but the actions that we observe are not always totally in line with those words, right?
Absolutely.
Like many times those words on the wall are kind of like aspirational. And so everybody knows that there's some gap between, just think about marketing, right? Like there's always some gap, but you see a picture of like a McDonald's burger on the commercial, and then you get a McDonald's burger, and those rarely look the same. So we all know kind of subconsciously that there's some gap between the claims that are made externally and like what that actual experience is. And so I think it's our job as leaders, whether it's a leader of a team or a parent or a leader of a boardroom or a leader of a company, whatever, to try to close that gap between the aspirational claims that are made in the quote unquote marketing documents in the actual experience that people have. Because as that gap widens, then I think the words have less value. And, people end up really acting in accordance with what they see around them, not the code of conduct that's delivered to them on, you know what I'm saying, their first day of work.
And as you said before, we cannot assume that people understand exactly the same under integrity as we do, for example. Also, when it comes to values, when we are not talking about it, how should we know, or how could we know what the other one thinks and what they understand? And it's exactly the same also when you said about the code of conduct. I had an example, I think it's a few months ago with a client. It was for the C-level a pretty clear code of conduct. But at the end, when we really implemented it with the teams of, 500 people or so, there were so many questions. The words they understood, but how should they act right now? And I think it's exactly the same with integrity. What are the expectations? How should people behave? What do we understand? And especially also now with all the globalization we have different cultures, and different culture also means different understanding of integrity. What is your experience with that?
Well, there's a lot in that question. I think it's one thing to like read a recipe, and it's another thing to watch a YouTube video of somebody doing that recipe. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot more information in like witnessing something in real life versus seeing like those words on that, cookbook. You know what I mean? And so I think, being able to talk about those values, being able to talk about them in action, how these principles might apply in a different situation, in accounting is all based on a series of principles. And then if you understand those principles, then you can usually kind of figure out what's the right answer in, a certain fact pattern, right? all of those potential fact patterns that you might come in contact with are not articulated explicitly in those principles, but those principles end up kind of being foundational or whatever, and can direct us in what we need to do in a particular situation. And so I think the same thing is true, with a code of conduct, right? Like a code of conduct is really just a bunch of principles, and we have to be able to talk about those principles and see how those principles might manifest in different situations to really make clear in the mind of the people we're trying to influence what that hierarchy of priorities are, or what the true hierarchy of, values are, right? Like we're in, my business is a for-profit business. We're trying to generate a good return for our, investors. We're trying to create a great, place to work for our internal stakeholders. We want to be a great partner to the people that choose to do business with us. But sometimes those things come into conflict. And I think when we can talk about those pinch points, or those times where, just like in terms of a parable, or like role playing, or just anecdotally talk about how that prioritization should really kind of play out, I think it can allow for, again, those words on the page to kind of come to life and really help instruct people and ultimately influence the behavior that hopefully is, in line with that, that ideal culture, or that ideal situation that we're trying to create.
Absolutely. And
You mentioned something though about the international piece,
mhm,
and I think it takes some intentionality to like bridge those gaps across the pond or across different sort of country lines. But I think when you boil it down, every business is like a human, it's a people business, you know what I mean? And like all human beings, regardless of your culture, we have a lot of pretty much all the same base needs. You know what I'm saying? So sometimes you might have to translate something, but I think there's a lot more overlap, or a lot more congruence, if that's a word, between these different cultures than we might think. But it takes some work. It takes a little bit of intentionality to kind of explore that and make sure that whatever we're trying to get done is interpreted appropriately on that other side of the line.
absolutely. And that's exactly also what I meant. It's about the interpretation, and we have to intend to be intentional, and we also have to be patient and explain what we understand or what the other understand, and we also have to listen. So that's what I mean, what I also
Right.
meant with the different cultures, because we are all humans, and I think 99% of all our employees, or all the people or stakeholders we work with, they want to do the best. And we have to define what is the best and how do we work together. And I think this also leads me to another question. You already started to explain it a little bit before, but how do you ensure that integrity stays visible when speed, scale, or investor pressure intensifies? I think these are the situations when it also could change, even though we would have some kind of common understanding on what integrity means, or how should we behave. But these kind of situations under pressure also outlines what maybe doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, running a business or running a team, it's just like you're like the captain of some ship that's going across the ocean, and it's just all storms. Like the ocean is never,
Flat.
placid. It's never
Shouldn't
just
be.
flat. Like it's always moving. And, you have to have, I think, an understanding that as those storms come, you have to be able to remind yourself. And again, I'm not perfect at this. Like there's always these competing things, and very few things are black and white, right? Like we kind of live in this world of the gray. And I just think it takes again, an intentionality to, try to do the right thing and try to model that for the people around us. And also I think for me, I think I have to believe that there is like a universal law of reaping and sowing, and that I can't really control the outcome of things. So all I can control is my attitude, or like how I show up and how our team shows up. And I just think if you do the right thing and you put people first, and you don't treat them like labor units, and you don't treat clients like, piggy banks to break open and, pull money out of, but rather as like true partners, well, then over time, it's not like every single seed you plant turns into an oak tree. But you plant enough seeds, like you're going to have a copse of trees, and you're going to be, fine. So we have to like recognize that, you can't sort of control the increase. You can't control the growth of the seed. Like I don't even know how seeds actually work. You just put them in the ground and magically they turn into something. But that's kind of how business is, I think. And that's how kind of leadership is. It's like, all I can control is like how I plant those seeds. And then the growth is sort of going to come on its own. And so I think that sort of longer term view and that belief in this universal law of reaping and sowing creates a little bit more room or a little bit more budget in those points of conflict to, do the right thing and try to articulate that,
Absolutely. And when we now also shift a little bit and really focus on you and your experience about how can you recall a moment when your integrity felt quietly but clearly compromised?
Man, I don't know. I mean, there's so many opportunities for that, like there's so many situations where,
Maybe
I don't know,
you
like,
don't have to. It was just a question. Maybe you
no,
have some
it's a
kind.
good
Yeah.
question. I don't want to like dodge the question. I'm not trying to paint the picture that I'm like
No, no.
this paragon of integrity, that I don't battle with, temptations and all those kinds of things. Like, I think that's like a human experience, and that everybody does that. I don't know if this is even an integrity thing. Well, yeah, I guess it is. I mean, integrity to the extent that like, do my deeds follow my words? I think when your deeds don't follow your words, perhaps that's like an integrity violation. And there have been a couple of times recently where, like zooming out, I have a principle that I want our organization to be an organization that people, whether they work here for 2 years or they work here for 20 years, they can look back at their time here with fondness. And this can be a welcoming place for people that allows them to put their God-given gifts, the genius that's, imbued in all of us, to work in pursuit of our organizational mission, right? In doing that, sometimes, the expectations that I have for people, like people don't live up to those expectations. And look, I'm a participant in this play. I'm not just an observer. So I have an influence on all those things. But if somebody who I have felt that I've done right by for a while leaves and kind of doesn't, leaves the organization in kind of a bad way, I feel like my integrity with respect to that sort of principle or that desire to, create that kind of an organization can kind of come under attack. And there have been a couple of times where, I've kind of seen myself at this crossroads of like getting jaded by that experience of feeling quote unquote betrayed by somebody, which is very dramatic. Or, and I have to make the decision on like, is that going to actually influence the way that I treat that person on the way out? Is that going to influence the way that I show up for the next person who comes in the organization? Or am I going to just stand on, which way am I going to go, right or left at this crossroads? And I think it's easy to go left. It's easy to get jaded. It's easy to, feel, man, I give so much and like, I don't get it back. But it's like, I just, I have to go back to like, I can't be somebody, I'm an accountant or a recovering accountant. I can't keep a balance sheet for everything. It's like I would drive myself nuts keeping track of all the things I think I do versus the things I get back. That's like no way to live. I just want to put out good seeds. I just want to try to be a good leader. I want to try to do right by clients, do right by the people that, throw their hat in the ring with our organization. And some do, some don't. So what? It's all good. We're going to keep kind of moving forward regardless,
Wow, that's super reflected. You know that.
Well, thank you.
No, really. So it's impressive. So thank you very much. And if you were mentoring now a future CEO, what integrity insight would you want them to carry into every high-stake meeting?
I would say you really just have to have a long-term view on things. Like, I think if you can have a long-term view or, an infinite view, so to speak, which is obviously impossible to, like, we can't even comprehend what, infinity means as humans. But if you can have a longer-term view for things and I think that allows for, like I was saying before, like a little bit more budget to not live and die by every single day. You can't live and die by, we got a great deal today. We closed a big deal. Great. And then, a client left. Now I'm in the pits. It's like that whipsaw. It's easy to fall into that. And I think it's easy to fall into that when your view is really short term, but if we can have a longer term view and keep our eyes on the top of the mountain that we're climbing toward, then we're not going to get so frustrated along the way. Like climbing a mountain is hard. So like,
Absolutely.
if I was mentoring a CEO, I would say, guess what? Nothing's going to go according to plan. It's going to be tough. You're going to be sore climbing the mountain, but it's noble to climb a mountain, and forward movement is what the name of the game is. And so there's always something to improve. There's always something to get better on. And there's always something. This is probably it. You asked. So this is the type of mentor I am. I'm a very rambly type of mentor. But like at the end of the day, it's on you. It's on you as an individual for the outcome that you're generating. Like there's that saying that says every system is specifically and perfectly designed for the outcome that it's creating. And so there's always a different way that you can show up. There's always a way that you could have said something a little bit different. There's always an opportunity for learning in terms of like your own agency and the application of your, that agency in any situation,
And as you said, it's a marathon and it's not a sprint. And
Exactly. Yeah.
what I often see, there is a difference between managers or CEOs being managers and CEOs being founders.
And what's that difference that you've seen?
What I see is that I think a founder who is a CEO, of course, like you, for example, they rather have a long-term view than managers being a CEO, knowing exactly. So maybe I'm going to do that for 2 years or for 3 years, but not for longer. And I think it's really also destroying values and assets in a company because, as you said before, you need to have more budget. You need to have the patience also to have these kind of waves during a journey you go through with an organization. And I would really love to have a little bit more strategic foresight also from managers being CEOs than what I often also see right now over the last 5 years maybe. So what do you see out in the market right now when it comes to that?
Well, I think you totally touched on it. This sort of long-term versus short-term view, or this marathon versus sprint mentality. And you touched on something else that really resonated with me, which was, there's a lot of value destruction in having too short-term of a view. There are some public company CEOs, and like when I was in undergrad, GE was really famous for this, for never missing earnings. They would say what their earnings were going to be for a quarter, and they always hit it, and they could move things around and so forth. And I think when people are all kind of incentive machines, and so people are going to respond to their incentives. And so if you're a CEO of a public company and you're a disproportionate amount of your compensation is tied to stock options, and Wall Street likes predictability, well then that desire is always there to like hit those numbers and never have any surprises, and that can cause maybe potentially financial manipulation to make sure that those numbers are hit. Or if nothing else, you're going to sandbag those numbers to some degree, and you're not going to take the risks, and you're not going to make the bets that are best for the long-term health of the organization if you're just focused on this quarter and then the next quarter and then the next quarter. You have other CEOs on the other side of that spectrum. There was a guy who wrote a really great book, and I really looked up to him a lot, but he would famously never give guidance to Wall Street. So this is just kind of a parable, or this is just kind of an analogy, but he would say, I'm not giving any guidance, but I know 10 years from now, this company is going to be way better off than if I gave you a bunch of guidance quarter by quarter along the way. And in fact, his company grew, way better than his competitors. His employee engagement was way higher than his competitors because, again, he wasn't focused on what was in front of him this next quarter. He was focused on the next 10 years. And I think when you have that longer term view and that broader scope, you don't get so myopic and so zoomed in on what's right in front of you. And that look, nothing grows straight up like that. Nothing and anything grows straight, nothing natural, nothing, whatever grows in that kind of a line. And I think when we try to impose that on our own careers or on our business or on the development of our teams or whatever, that can have that can be a lot of value destructing energy. But you obviously have to balance it because, back to my mountain analogy, you're not just going to kind of like drift up to the top of the mountain. Like it takes forward pressure, and you have to focus on goals, and you have to, push yourself forward and push your teams forward and all that kind of stuff. It's a delicate balance for sure, but
For me,
Yeah,
it's also a difference between a leader and a manager. A leader has that strategic foresight, also make sure that the organization and also the teams are resistant and also resilient, versus a manager who only sees the next quarter and tries to fix it somehow. That also the figures make sense. So I think it's also the DNA at the end. You see it within an organization. The one we said is more sustainable than the other ones, because I think success is not linear, not at all.
right. Yeah, I mean, things happen little by little, then all at once. And if you look at a stock chart, I mean, it's a bunch of ups and downs, and then hopefully over time, there's more ups than downs. I mean, that's what my career has been. That's what parenting is. That's what a
That's it.
marriage is. That's what a business is. I mean, that's what literally
Yeah.
every single thing is. And I think, look, when the downs happen, we want to get those things back up. But the occurrence of the downs doesn't mean that's just natural. It doesn't mean necessarily that's, something's like going to die or whatever.
Yes, if they have enough patience. So when you now look back at your path you went through, so what could you give now to our audience when it comes to integrity? Organizational integrity, corporate integrity, but also individual integrity. Just maybe a few sentences on that. What should they take with them?
I just think it kind of starts with people at the end of the day. Like every business is a people business, like I said, and we have to understand how people work, and you have to understand that the experiences that people have, whether it's in their childhood or how they grew up or their corporate experiences from other organizations, all those things influence us and all those things kind of shape us. And I think people are always looking for how big is that gap between, words are easy. Everybody, words are free. So how big is that gap between the words and what people are actually seeing around them? And, I just think understanding that and believing that, people want to be a part of something, people want to be a part of something that they can be proud of. We're all built to work. Like every human being is built to work. I mean, the days that I have a hard day where I'm working hard, I feel way better than a day when I'm just like laying around on the couch. You know what I'm saying? So like we're all built for that. And I think there is a component of trust that is kind of foundational to integrity itself, which is it's a mobilizing force. It's a force of optimization. It's a force that can allow somebody who maybe had a bad experience at another company or with a different boss to really let their guard down and really put those gifts to work. Because like, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like we're all kind of
Yes.
fighting against this fight or flight mode, or we're fighting against, we all have this self-preservation gene or whatever in our DNA. And when we're expending mental RAM on self-preservation unnecessarily, maybe, you're wasting RAM that could be applied to doing something or pushing the ball forward or, making an impact and so forth. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. And, I just think you said a couple of sentences and these are really long sentences, but
It's okay.
I just think there's like a lot of opportunity in that. And, we just have to tune in to what's going on around us because like, again, integrity is not set in stone. Integrity is almost, integrity to the extent we're talking about a culture of integrity. It's really in the eye of the beholder being the stakeholders. And that feedback loop between what they're seeing influences how they themselves end up showing up. So it's like, you have to always have your eye on it. And I don't know. It's just,
Thank you.
it's like a weather pattern. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just moving all the time. And if you overlook it, any garden, if you're not tending to it, is going to get overgrown with stuff. So you have to continually check that garden and make sure that things are moving in the right direction,
So, Nick, thank you very much for your role modeling in corporate integrity. Really, it's so great that also what I see, what you are doing. So you are really also one of my peers giving integrity a voice. And I think it's so important that we do that because the more people we reach with this kind of information and also understanding about integrity, I think that's the impact we can have. Doing
Agree.
that, talking about it, and also inviting people to talk about it and share their experience. So thank you very much. I think also the audience, we highly appreciate your contribution, and I wish you all the best also for the future. We all follow you, and I hope we have another conversation soon over the next few months. Thank you very much, Nick.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. This was fun.
This was another episode of the Human Factor Corporate Integrity Matters, where we uncover leadership strategies fostering governance, risk awareness, resilience, and strategic foresight. Today, with one of my highly appreciated peers, Nick Gallo. Guided by the principle, corporate integrity and resilience are foundations of trust and long-term success in unpredictable times. Thank you for listening, and now take care and nurture your own resilience too.